Om Sahana Bhavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahe Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahe. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Gurur Brahma Gurur Vishnu Gurur Devo Maheshwaraha Guru Sakshat Param Brahma Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Vakratunda Mahakaya Surya Koti Samaprabha Nirvignam Kuru Me Deva Sarvakaryeshu Sarvada. Om Gam Ganapataye Namaha. Om Gam Ganapataye Namaha. Om Gam Ganapataye Namaha. Om Sri Sai Satchidananda Vishwarupaya Namaha. Om Sri Sai Satchidananda Vishwarupaya Namaha. Om Sri Sai Satchidananda Vishwarupaya Namaha. Namaste. So we had a lot of questions. Mind is the topic, I think. Everybody, that is the main issue for whole of humanity, the mind, how to deal with the mind. So it is said in the Amrita Bindu Upanishad, actually, there's a saying, and Swami used to quote it a lot in his discourses, Mana eva manushyanam karanam bandha mochayoho. For man, mind is the cause of bondage, and mind is also the cause of liberation. So it depends which way you turn the key of the mind. You turn it towards the Lord, or do you turn it towards the world? That's what Swami often used to say. So the mind is very important. Swami says in one of his discourses, mind is like a house fly. It lacks the ability to investigate if a thing is real and relevant or otherwise. One moment it feeds upon the sacred food, and the next moment it flies away to sit upon a garbage dump. In this manner, man ponders on good ideas and positive thoughts for a minute, but quickly becomes disturbed and agitated with bad ideas and negative thoughts the next minute. Mind has no holds barred. It has no sense to discriminate between purity and impurity. There is buddhi, intellect, the faculty that can examine things and discriminate between the relevant and irrelevant. But it is not given an opportunity and is not being made use of by man. So this is a very important quote from Swami, because in Shastra, I thought what I'd do, because I had lots of questions, and towards the end, I didn't have time also to go through a lot of them. But I saw a general gist, I saw a general theme to all the questions. So I have clubbed them into three particular categories. The first question, the first category, I think, is what is the mind actually? Do we really understand? First, we have to understand something to deal with it. We have to know what it is before we can deal with it. So, what is the mind according to our Shastra? And this is based on two questions that I was asked. In Swami's parlance, mind is clearly defined as a bundle of thoughts, involuntary, and intellect as a discriminatory faculty. But in some scriptures, both are grouped together as mind. And it is said, develop the mind. So people can get confused about this. And there was another question which asked about messages coming, whether messages come from the mind or the intellect. So these are very important things to understand. And the first thing to understand is, what is this mind? And the mind defined in the Shastra is not a particular entity. It is a bundle of thoughts. Vrittikatmakam manaha. That is what is said in Shastra. And it is called antahkarana. Antahkarana means antahkara means the inner instrument. Actually, inner instrument is the name for the mind. So there is a wielder. If it is called an instrument, there is somebody who wields this instrument. And this antahkarana, this inner instrument in our Shastra, is divided into four. And these are not four divisions like different compartments of the brain or something like that. Nothing like that. The Shastra gives names to four types of thinking that we have, four types of thought. So it is very interesting. What is the first type of thought? it is manaha. Manaha is sankalpa vikalpatmakam manaha. So that which is fluctuating. The mind is the seat of emotions. It is the nature of vacillation and oscillation. This manaha aspect of thinking, it oscillates and vacillates. So the sankalpa vikalpatmakam manaha is the definition of this aspect of thought. And this is the one that we mostly have to deal with. This is the one that we all have issues with, this fluctuating thinking and the emotions also that sometimes we're not able to manage. Sankalpa, for example, I'll give you an example of sankalpa is, I've locked the car door. And the next moment the thought comes, vikalpa, did I lock the car door? So immediately there is doubt. So this is the way that it keeps changing. There is doubt and there is doubt, and then there is definiteness. So this is how the mind keeps shifting, vacillation and oscillation. Vikalpa sankalpatmaka. And this always seems to come up when I try and make major decisions in my life. This is the particular type of thinking that we are trying to, again, neutralize, or we're trying to manage in our life. And the other type of thinking that we have is buddhihi. Buddhihi is the nishchayatmika vrittihi, antahkarana vrittihi. It is the form of inquiry, the knowledge. It settles the doubt. It is the part of thinking, decision, resolution, and knowing. This is the buddhi aspect of thought. So I go by buddhi, and when I go by buddhi, it's final. It dismisses the manaha aspect of thinking. So it manages the manaha aspect of thinking. And it dismisses it because it brings in wisdom. It brings in knowledge behind the other thought. So it is the definite aspect of the mind, the thoughts that come. Cognitive wisdom also we can call it. This is called intellect buddhi. And it's depicted beautifully in the chariot imagery of that we see in the Shastra, where Krishna is the Sanatana Sarati. He's eternal charioteer in the form of the buddhi, in form of a conscience, and he's holding the reins of the mind, which the five senses are the horses, and they go in different directions. And he is the one holding the reins of the mind, and he's guiding the five senses in the right direction in life. So buddhi is the intellect aspect of thinking. That is also a very important aspect of thought. And there is another aspect of the thinking that Shastra talks about, which is chittam. Chittam is memory. Chintana kartru chittam, or anusandatmika antahkarana vritti, which means the memories that are brought up, the memories that come into the picture, the memories that we have to deal with and we act on, is the third aspect of thought that the Shastra talks about. And this aspect of thinking includes our vasanas, unconscious. These vasanas are certain habits, certain patterns of thinking that they come up off and on in our lives, and then we have to deal with those aspects. So these vasanas, there are good and bad vasanas, but generally these are contained in the unconscious, in the chittam aspect of our thought. And the last aspect of the mind that Shastra discusses is ahankaraha. Ahamkarta iti ahankaraha. I did this, the sense of doership, the subject of knowing, the subject of knowledge, the one that claims the memories, the one that claims the all the other thought forms, the one that claims, I am sad, I am happy, I am sure, I am clear. All of this is the I am aspect of thought. So this is how Shastra defines the mind, the thinking aspect of the mind. There are more technical things actually that we have to go through, but this is the four types of thinking that we mainly have to deal with in our lives. So the first questions that we had is talking about disciplining the mind. How do we gain peace of mind? So now, even with this little knowledge, you can see that what is it that is troubling us? Which aspect of thinking that troubles us? Memories have no power if I don't allow them to have power over me. Memory is not a problem. The intellectual capacity is also not a problem, because that is very definite. It is one of clarity. It is one of truth. So that is also not an issue. The manaha aspect is the issue. The manaha, which is the seat of emotions, Those are the things that we have to deal with mainly in life, and the confusions they cause as well. So this mana aspect is what Bhagwan addresses in the Bhagavad Gita, and in all major texts of Shastra. This is mana aspect is what is addressed. And there is even Arjuna had the same issue with this aspect of thinking. He says in the 6th chapter, very, very interesting verse, he says, Chanchalam himana Krishna pramati balavadridam tasyaham nigraham manye vayuriva sudushkaram. So the mind, he says, is very restless. It is turbulent and obstinate. He tells the Lord. So Arjuna, such a great warrior, such a great character, he also had the issues with the mind, which shows it is a very human thing. He said, it is very obstinate and it is very stubborn and strong. And he even goes on to say that it appears that it is more difficult to control than the wind itself. The mind is more difficult to control than the wind itself. Now, that is very interesting because some of the questions that came up were about that. Despite having lived a spiritual life, despite having lived a life of values, these thoughts keep coming at us like, bombarded with our, own mind and the ways of thinking. How do we manage these? So this is, this was a very, very, one of the themes of the questions that was asked. And that is why I took these particular verses. Bhagavan says in response to Arjuna's question here, and a very, very beautiful verse as well, Asamshayam mahabaho mano durnigraham chalam abhyasena tu kaunteya vairagyena cha grihyate. So he says very clearly in this verse, he agrees with Arjuna. He says, oh, Arjuna, yes, what you say is correct. The mind is indeed very difficult to restrain. It is very difficult to control. So he does feel for the mind, Arjuna's mind and everybody else's mind. But he says 2 things you need in life to manage the mind. What are those 2 things? The 2 magic words that Bhagavan uses, abhyasena tu kaunteya, vairagyena cha grihyate. Abhyasa and vairagya, through continuous practice, repeated practice, being alert to one's thoughts, being alert to one's thoughts and managing our thoughts, it is able to be managed. It is able to be managed by you. And not just by continuous abhyasa practice, vairagya also comes into the picture. Vairagya means objectivity. Objectivity means you're objective of your thoughts. You're objective, meaning you don't become so subjective that the thoughts overwhelm you. You have to discover a distance between you and your thoughts. As I said, the mechanism of the mind in Shastra is called antahkarana, inner instrument. And as I also pointed out, for it to be called inner instrument, there has to be somebody who uses the instrument. And that is what Shastra says is you. You are the user of the instrument, but we get used by the instrument in life. That is the whole problem. You have to discover that you are the master of the mind, not the other way around, not the slave of the mind. So here, there are some questions which come along with this. What can we do to enhance thoughts that promote positivity when attempting to control our thoughts? So Swami often says, mind is a monkey and learn to tame it. Should our thoughts be tamed constantly in order to survive in the midst of a fast-flowing world? So all of these questions were asked, where there are so many things, both positive and negative, influencing that contribute to how your mind perceives things. How do you control or manage the information to absorb and not to absorb? So all of these are very, very, to do with the managing the mind. So we have to understand on a deeper level this, as I said, the chittam aspect, Shastra says, has the subconscious, the tendencies, the vasanas, and this is called prakriti in the Shastra. It's so interesting that whole thousands of years ago, the rishis had seen the aspects of the mind and the problems that people have to face with the thinking. So the subconscious, the tendencies, the vasanas, the prakriti are all stored here in the subconscious mind. And these are called raga. They're stored in the form of ragas and dveshas. Ragas and dveshas have to be understood. I'll explain them in more detail just coming up, because these are the main culprits in life. These are the ones that Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, if you don't manage these raga dveshas, intense likes and dislikes, which come up because of vasanas, then you're in trouble in life. So this is the main problems in life. The ragas and dveshas are stored here. And this leads to, if I follow the ragas and dveshas, what happens? I live an impulsive, mechanical life. And all the troubles begin with this impulsive, mechanical type of life. So in the Bhagavad Gita, Bhagavan says, in the 3rd chapter, Sadrisham cheshtate swasyaha prakriti jnanavanapi prakritim yanti bhutani nigrahah kim karishyati. So this is another important thing to understand. We are not in control of our vasanas. He says in this verse, you cannot control your vasanas. You cannot control certain aspects of your thinking. Things that arise, suddenly they rise up. We don't know where they come from. Suddenly negative thoughts come into our mind. Do I will them to come? No, he says it is not your free will involved in those type of thoughts. Even other thoughts, even good thoughts, any type of thoughts, suddenly they come. It is not your free will involved in the thinking. You cannot control your samskaras. You cannot control the desires that according to your karma, they arise. Bhagavan says, Nigraha kim karishati. What is the use of repression? What is the use of suppressing them? This is a great relief for us because Bhagavan himself says, there are many thoughts which are not under our control. So this controlling the mind, we have to understand differently now. There is no mind control. This word control is very, very, it's difficult to understand. You have to understand it properly. It has to be understood in the level of management. You can manage these involuntary thoughts that just come. So we cannot prevent negative thoughts from coming in our mind. This is number one rule. Bhagavan himself says that. You cannot prevent it because it's something stored from past lives, from your youth, from your childhood, everything. And it arises according to your karma. That is also, he mentions that very clearly. But he says, it is not that you're helpless. You don't need not go after your nature. You need not go after those negative thoughts. You need not follow the patterns of thinking that keep coming up all the time, which are not helpful for you in your life. He says, manage them. These raga dveshas can be managed. He says, indriyasyarthe raga dvesho vyavastito tayor navashamagachet tauhyasya paripantino. These in every object, he says in this verse, there is ability to bind you. The object or the person or the situation can become an object of longing or hating, of intense like or intense dislike. But he says in this verse, this is the problem in our life. Don't let your likes and dislikes take you for a ride in your life. This is the key of Bhagavad Gita psychology. These raga dveshas are the main reasons our mind is disturbed. That is what Bhagavan says. Because what is raga? Now let us understand what raga is. Disturbance of the mind are classified into two headings in the scriptures. One is raga. What is raga? That this situation, this object, or this person will fulfill me forever. I will feel complete if I have this situation in my life. So raga, what does raga make you do? It makes you go after things. It makes you go after situations. It makes you go after people in your life you feel will make you happy always. This is called raga. There are two pursuits when raga is mentioned. They make you go after things or they make you retain things as well. So raga makes you go after things in life. It makes you retain things in life. And dvesha, what does dvesha do? Dvesha is the opposite. This situation, this object or this person will bring me pain. So what do? I avoid that thing. I avoid that person. Or if I already have something that's giving me pain, I want to get rid of it. So Bhagavan says there's four pursuits that we have in our life. We go after or we retain something to make us happy, or we avoid and get rid of something to make us happy. These are called paripanti. No, Krishna says this type of life is what samsara is. This going after, retaining, aiming to retain is called raga. This getting rid of, avoiding is called dvesha. And this is the beginning of the fall of man. He said, these are the two enemies that the mind has to face and are the main culprits for disturbances of the mind. So how do we manage them? In fact, there's a beautiful few verses I just want to quickly go through that are mentioned in the Bhagavad Gita, this where Bhagwan clearly mentions the fall of the mind. So he says, Dhyayato vishayan pumsaha sangasteshu pajayate. So he says, Dhyayato vishayan pumsaha. When you keep dwelling on objects of senses, when you keep dwelling on something that you're attached to, or something that you feel close to, or even something you don't want in your life. Sometimes when we don't want something, we also have that in our mind. When the mind is occupied like this, sangasteshu pajayate, there's a form of attachment born. Sangha, there is some connection that is born with that particular situation, object, or person. And this is where we have to be careful, because if we let it go further, then he says, this is the way the human being declines mentally. So he says, sangasteshu pajayate. Once that connection is made, sangat sanjayate kamaha. A binding desire is born. Binding desire to gain that object. Kamaha means longing. There's a longing to gain that object, or there's a longing to get rid of something as well. That is also attachment. So when I kama jayate, when that longing is born, then I know that I'm in trouble, because my mind is consumed, disturbances happen. This is why the mind gets disturbed. I'm not able to manage it. So sangasteshu pajayate. Then he says, sangat sanjayate kamaha. So from that, so the kamaha is born, longing is born. Kamat krodo bijayate. What happens when this longing is born in the mind and it is not fulfilled? Unfulfilled desires, and this is something which we can all see in our life. Bhagavan says unfulfilled desires lead to krodha, anger. So all the anger that we show towards others and people, situations in our life, is nothing but unfulfilled desires which are stored in the mind. It is not the people outside that make us angry. It is not the situation outside, he says, make you angry. The disturbance caused in the mind is because of unfulfilled desire. It remains as an obstacle in a person. So this is the fall. You can see that from the longing, when it doesn't happen the way you want, you get angry. Who has blocked this? Who has been an obstruction in my life, not to allow this thing to happen in my life? When the obstruction is there, I see that person or that thing as an obstruction to my desire, anger is born. And Bhagavan says it doesn't stop there. What happens when you become an angry person, when this anger is born? Krodad bhavati sammohaha. This anger leads to delusion. This anger leads to delusion. It covers your mind. It covers your thinking capacity. You're not able to make right decisions. All the wisdom that you have gained up till that point, anger destroys in a second. That is what Shastra says. There is no use for that wisdom or that knowledge you've gained, because it doesn't serve you any longer. And the anger is manifested in the, against all the people you thought became an obstacle in your life. And he says, sammohat smriti vibhramaha. From this sammohat, from when its mind is so deluded, what happens? You forget. Smriti vibhramaha. Everything is forgotten. There, all your memory as well. Memory, the discriminative faculty is gone. Your memory power is also forgotten. Bhagavan says this is how the decline of the mind goes. Because of one small thing. What did it begin with? When you dwell on objects of desire. When the mind goes towards objects of desire and it dwells on objects of desire, this is the decline that can happen. It need not happen, but this is what he's showing. He's warning us, be careful. When you talk about mental disturbances, controlling the mind or managing the mind, you should understand this is the way that we can manage. By understanding this happens. And he says, he goes further to say, Smriti Bramshad Buddhi Nashaha. When the memory capacity is gone, the human being is as good as lost. The human being becomes an animal. Because what is the difference between us and animals? We have the same thing. We are born, we eat, we sleep, we procreate, we enjoy, and we die, just like animals. But there's one differentiating factor between a human being and an animal. And what is that? That is the intellect. That is the ability to think, the discriminative faculty. Only a human being is given. That is why it is said, Jantu nam narajanma durlabam. Amongst all type of births, it is the human birth which is the greatest of all births. So this is what can happen. The ladder of fall, the ladder of human fall, and this will happen if he tells Arjuna, if you don't learn to become master of your mind, what will happen? It will be this is exactly what will happen. You will be robbed. He says, Indriyanam hi charatam yan manonu vidhiyate tadasya harati prajnam vayoramamimambasi. So here in this, again, this verses, they all flow together. I put them in a different order because this is how the explanation works. But he says this mind that follows the wandering senses. Wherever the eyes go, the mind goes. Wherever the ears go, the mind goes. There's no discrimination what I allow into my system. First of all, this body is called a nine-gated city. It is the city, Dehi Puri. The Dehi who lives in the city is what? Atma Bhagavan. It is walking, like Swami used to say, walking, talking temple. It's divinity that resides here. Do I allow everything in my eyes? Whatever I see, should I allow? Should I allow trash into a temple? No, I don't throw trash into the temple. In the same way, Bhagavan says, if you just take in everything your senses without discriminating what you allow in, then that is where all the disturbances of the mind begin. So the first thing is sense management. We have to manage our senses. He says here that charatam indriyanam, yet, so this senses moving amongst the sense objects, we have to be very discriminative what we allow into the mind. Manaha anuvidiyate, the mind goes along, backs the senses. If you see, the mind backs the senses and goes out through the senses, and the object, the knowledge of the object is gained. So we have to be very, again, very prudent where the mind backs the senses, because he says in this verse, prajnam harati, whatever has been this buddhi, whatever knowledge or wisdom that you've gained in life, it robbed away. It is like a car without brakes. If I let my senses go for a ride, it is like a car without brakes, out of control, dangerous to oneself and to others. That is why our scriptures, and Swami also emphasizes so much about sense control, sense management. Anything you read, Swami says, manage the senses, control the senses, because he knows the senses are the culprits, they're not the culprits, sorry. The mind backing the senses become the problem for restlessness in the system. So he says how in Bhagwan in this verse says, Ambasi Vayuhu Navam Iva. The boat which is meant to cross the waters, the very boat is taken away, the mind. The mind is the boat filled with knowledge that gets you across the ocean of samsara. But the very mind is robbed away by the strong winds of the senses and the mind going after the senses. So what do we have to do? He says, educate the buddhi, educate the intellect, make the intellect master that mind, make it available to you when you need. You keep the inner house clean. So you re-engineer, reorganize, acknowledge the presence of Ishvara in your life. And when you acknowledge the presence of Ishvara in your life becomes yoga. It becomes a union with the Lord. Every moment you're with the Lord itself. And for such people, he says, Raga Dvesha Viyuktaistu Vishayan Indriyaischaran Atma Vashyer Vidhe Atma prasadam adhigacchati. So the importance again of sense and mind management. You regulate your senses. Don't allow everything in. You are the watchman at the gates of your nine-gated city. You are the one who is in charge of your life, in charge of your mind. And the psychology of the Bhagavad Gita is just this. The whole of the Bhagavad Gita discusses this. And you do what is to be done. When you do what's to be done, it is called swadharma, swakarma. Sometimes what you have to do in life is not what you like to do in life. Many of the times what we like to do in life is not what we have to do in life. And this is what Bhagavad Gita neutralizes. This always going after what I want to do, what I like to do, and instead doing what I have to do, what is in my dharma, what is dharmic thing to do. So this is the way to neutralize this binding likes and dislikes in life. It is the life of a karma yogi. Whole of Bhagavad Gita, Krishna discusses that. Be a karma yogi. What is a karma yogi? Just don't do action for the sake of result. That is, everybody is doing that. Whole Jagat is doing that. The world does action for the sake of result. You, how do you do action? You do action as arpanam. Work is worship. Anything you do is for the Lord. This is the way you neutralize your likes, because whatever you do, if it's for the Lord, even if you don't like to do it, you still do it because it is to be done. That is a karma yogi's attitude. And that is only one part of the karma yoga. Whatever you get in life also, prasada buddhi, prasada bhavana, that means that it is good for you. It is prasadam. It is something that is beneficial for you, even if it is unpleasant. It is given by a higher power. It is given by super intelligent Ishvara, Bhagavan himself. When I live this karma yogi lifestyle, what happens? Indriyai raga dvesha viyuktehi. The senses cease to control such a life. They don't dictate my life. The mind doesn't dictate where I go, what I do. Who dictates then? I dictate. I am in charge of my life. Finally, I'm put in control because I can choose where the mind goes. I can choose what I want to do. And Bhagavan says very beautifully in this verse, Vishayan Charan. He's Vishayan, by saying Vishayan Charan, which means moving around in the world, moving around with all the objects of the senses, I still can be a master. So why does he say this? Because you cannot run away from the world. Very beautifully, he adds this line. We cannot escape the world. We cannot escape the objects of the senses. We have to be very much in wherever we are and practice these teachings to help us to manage our mind and our senses. So Bhagavan says, escape route is not there, especially for Arjuna, he was saying, because Arjuna wanted to escape. He wanted to renounce the world. He wanted to go elsewhere. But Bhagavan says very clearly, you cannot avoid the world. You cannot avoid this world. You have to be in the world and practice. And such a person is called Videyatma, a person of self-control. He is a disciplined person. And he's also called by Bhagavan Atma Vashyehi. He is in the hands of himself. He is not in the hands of his mind. He is not in the hands of the senses. And such a person is an integrated personality. And what happens when you live such a life? He says, prasadam adhigacchati. So all this talk is to answer the questions about how do we gain peace of mind? How do we manage our thoughts? This particular section I discussed, this is the way. It is a way of life. It is not something you can force. It is a way. The thoughts themselves will get managed if you live this way of life. So he says, prasadam adhigacchati, which means that the world ceases to bind him. The world, he becomes tranquil and he avoids all mental turbulences. And with such a lifestyle, he gains prasannata or purity. He gains clarity in his life. This is called purity of mind. We hear many, many times in the Shastra and all the scriptures as well, purify your mind, make your mind pure. What does it mean? In the definition in the Bhagavad Gita, when you have a pure mind, It is when you have clarity, the mind becomes like a mirror. It is clear. It is no longer disturbed. It's not clouded and confused or taken for a ride by the senses and everything around. So this is how I gain peace of mind. I get a calm mind living this type of life. And when we say thought control or thought management, when I live a certain lifestyle, the thoughts themselves get managed. That's why I had to bring in these verses. You cannot just sit and control your mind. You have to practice living a certain lifestyle, that the mind itself becomes calm, and that is called purity. So a lot of the questions were put under this category. And the last category I found questions, which is also dealing with the mind, is the focus of the mind. How do we focus our mind? What is meditation? So there was especially the young people. I want to just a few of the questions here is, this year, people of my age group have had disruptions to their education and daily lives. Many of them are feeling lonely and unmotivated. Do you have any advice to overcome these feelings? That is very understandable given today's climate as well. It is not easy at all to be in this type of climate. And then the second question was, what should we be doing to keep our minds happy and healthy as 18-year-olds? So this was asked by some youth in the group, and how to practice concentration. And the last one, through the practice of meditation, we learn to understand the art of surrendering. To someone who is new to the practice, what does it mean to truly surrender a thought and emotions? So first of all, let us address, these feelings that we have of loneliness and feeling unmotivated. Of course, meditation is a great key to managing the mind. So as I said, what I've just said, the way of life will give you chitta shuddhi. It is called purity of mind. But despite having purity of mind, one may not have steadiness of mind, which is chitta naishchalyam. Chitta naishchalyam is steadiness of mind. And that is gained through meditative practices and gaining ability to focus in life. And this is called samadhanam in the scriptures. Samadhanam, samyak adhiyate anena iti samadhanam, which means you focus. Focus is very important for any type of success, because your quality of your life depends on how well you can concentrate and what you can focus on. Anything you do, the quality of life depends on what you can focus on, how well you can concentrate. This concentration power is called chitta ekagrata. This chitta, getting the ability to concentrate, focus the mind itself, will remove feelings of loneliness, feelings that we feel isolated. All of this actually helps, because then you're very much with the action you're doing in the present. You're very much with the activity you're doing in the moment. So the mind doesn't have a chance to wander and then become desolate and become, lonely and have those unmotivated feelings. So this samadhanam, focus, is very important for success in any field, including the spiritual field. So chitta ekagrata is chittasya eka vastu agre. It means the flow of sajatiya vritti pravaha, the flow of the thought, like a single connected thing, not a one track. Don't confuse with one track mind. It is the flow of the thoughts on one particular object. Chitta ekagrata. Like Ramana Maharishi used a beautiful example. Ajadaraya shrota samam sarala chintanam virala param. He says in his Upadesha Saram, very beautiful verse. It is like the flow of oil. When you pour oil from one vessel to another, how is it? Unbroken, it just flows. That is how the thinking should be. Once one practices certain things, certain techniques, then the thinking can become like that. The concentration, attention span, everything can grow through practice, certain practices that Bhagavan himself talks about in the 6th chapter of Bhagavad Gita. And also a great, great text that you can explore is Patanjali Yoga Sutras. Patanjali Ashtanga Yoga is an excellent system to manage the mind, because through an eightfold system, he shows you how you can manage the ways of thinking, manage the ways of your mind. So this dharana, holding steady, concentration, single focus, ekagrata it's called. And Bhagavan talks about this type of mind in the 6th chapter. He says, Yatha dipo nivatastaha nengate sopama smrita yogino yata chittasya yunjato yogam atmanaha. So just as a lamp is in a windless place, it doesn't flicker, does it? If it's in a windless place, that flame is steady. So he says that a person of disciplined mind remains steady when he is in meditation. And meditation is any time of the day where you can keep your mind steady on one particular occupation. So it is not just sitting and keeping it steady. It is that steadiness in whatever you're doing. It doesn't have a chance to go anywhere else. And how do you develop the steadiness of mind? It is not overnight. Again, nothing is overnight. Bhagavan tells us the way we practice. He says, Yato nischarati manaschanchala mastiram tatastato niyam yetat atmanyeva masham nayet. So whenever the mind wanders due to its flickering nature, because as we have seen, the mind's nature is to wander. If your mind doesn't wander, it is not normal. Actually, if you can sit, like that for living in a normal life, it is not considered normal. Mind's nature is to wander, but you can bring it under your management, as we've said. So when it is unsteady, the unsteady nature, the flickering nature of the mind, you can withdraw it, bring it back under the control of the self. Atmanyeva vasham nayet. From that object, bring it back to another object, divert. It is called thought diversion system, thought diverting system. It is like the magnifying glass. You focus the light of the sun through the magnifying glass. You can burn anything. You can burn something which is flammable because the focus is so much. So Bhagavan says, whenever it wanders, what is the practice? Meditation is actually bringing the mind back. That is the definition of meditation in the Shastra. It is not sitting, trying to rid the mind of thoughts. We cannot rid the mind of thoughts because the mind is thoughts. So this is also very important to understand. Nobody can rid the mind of thoughts. The mind is, the definition of mind is bundle of thoughts. What you can do in meditation is keep bringing the mind back. If it goes to Debenhams, if it goes shopping somewhere while you're sitting, then you bring it back. You think, oh, Black Friday, yes, I have to buy this from Amazon. No, bring it back. Keep bringing it back, bringing it back. This is the way that we manage our mind. Bhagavan says this is the technique, and this is the way you get it under your control. So this Atman Yeva Vasham Nayet means bringing it back will bring the mind to your control. And we have to connect it to the key verse that he had said before, which is Abhyasena, which is through practice. Keep repeated practice. We don't gain it in 5 minutes. We may not gain it even in a year. Repeated practice alone will give you that power. So that is one way of gaining focus. Of course, the main way of gaining focus with the mind is love or interest for something. If you notice, the mind is able to focus on something we love. If we're interested in something, mind will automatically go to that object of interest. So this is why also meditation in our Shastra is defined as Saguna Brahma Vishaya Manasa Vyaparaha, which means bring the form of the Lord into your meditative practices. It doesn't matter any form you take. Your mind cannot just be sitting absent. There has to be some form. Swami has recommended Jyoti meditation. You can follow even a flame. If you cannot bring his form there, you can look at a flame and meditate. But it is you cannot leave the mind without something to meditate on. Shastra says you need a form. Initially, we need to bring in some form to meditate on. And more we develop a relationship with that form, the more we develop a love for that form, what happens? The mind is able to stay. So this is a very, very good technique to get focus in life as well. Develop a love and interest for something. See the value of that thing in your life. As soon as you see the value, you have the love, you have the interest, what happens? Then your mind will go there. So this is how to develop the focus. And the last thing which comes with a lot of the things that had come questions that come about that is about uh, mindfulness and how it brings up negative things. So external activities are affecting my inner peace or inner feeling, because the mind is preoccupied, affecting my sleep. How do I overcome this problem? Somebody else had that same issue, that external activities are affecting the mind, and then in sleep. In mindfulness also, somebody said, does it really help control of the thoughts, or does it bring up more negativity? That was the question about mindfulness practice. And the last one is any advice for people that understand how to practice meditation, breathing, but they've suffered from trauma at a younger age. So how is this? How has the mind been wired this way over the years? So one thing we have to understand: meditation, it can bring up a lot of inner things. Okay, this is one of the consequences of meditation. It is not an easy process as well, because when the conscious, Bhagavan says that when the conscious mind is subdued, when you sit with yourself for a length of time, definitely stuff will come up, stuff will come out. It is like the mind vomiting, just as the body vomits things that it doesn't need. The mind also has mental vomit. So things could come up. So you have to be very prepared for this to happen. But according to one of these questions, if the mind is wired in a certain way over the years, will this stop, the meditation process? No, because history does not have to become your destiny, right? You can change your destiny. Just because you went through this in the past, it doesn't have to be your future. So this is what Bhagavan says in the 6th chapter as well, in a beautiful verse. Uddharet atmanatmanam atmanam avasadhayet atmeva hyatmano bandhuhu atmeva ripuratmanaha. He says here, elevate yourself through the power of your mind. Don't degrade yourself, because the mind can be your friend, but it can also become the enemy. So be very, very careful. You don't need to make the mind your enemy. You can make the mind your friend. And how do you make the mind your friend? By not degrading yourself, not rejecting yourself. So whatever comes up during meditation, Bhagavan says, don't reject yourself. Let it come out. It has to be released. So this process, the mindfulness, all these practices definitely will bring up negative thoughts and everything. It doesn't mean your meditation is not working. In fact, if more stuff comes up, you should see meditation is working. It is removing all the unnecessary things inside your mind first, before you can fill it up with the necessary things that you need in your life. So this is also a very beautiful thing that is said in our Shastra. And how do I cope, deal with these issues? So Bhagavan says the power of prayer. Power of prayer. Prayer is the way. If I find myself having to face these thoughts of loneliness or any of these things coming up when I sit with myself, then the Shastra says prayer. And who is the master of the mind in the Shastra? Of course, for us, we have Swami, but the depiction of Chandrasekhara, who is that? He is the Lord who carries the moon on his head. What does that signify? Chandra is the mind. He is the master of the mind. So chanting a mantra for Shiva, Om Namah Shivaya, Om Namah Shivaya, repeating japa mantra will also help the process for especially the young people, youth. What I recommend is that you take up a mantra. You can repeat it whenever the thoughts go in other direction, you feel unmotivated. Just keep chanting the mantra. Just keep doing the japa. Swami has said nama smarana. Why has he said? Because that is a great ability to focus the mind, to manage these thoughts, to bring your mind under your control. So this is one of the solutions to dealing with very negative thoughts and everything that can arise also. And another solution to dealing with, which Swami also discusses, because Shastra also says what is another responsible thing for scattering the mind. It is self-interest. Self-interest scatters our mind. That is why we always say, do service. Think about people less well off than you. Go out, serve the poor. Swami has always said this. Why? Because he says, an unselfish mind is a relaxed mind. You have no time to dwell on yourself and your own. When you serve others, you're worshiping the Lord as well. So this is a very good way of developing chitta shuddhi, reaching out, doing service to others, narrow your focus on self-interest, your all the vulnerabilities, the anxiety, fear, and frustration get reduced, and you serve the Lord. Manava seva, Madhava seva. You serve the Lord and others. There was a very beautiful saying by a Swami. He was from the Ramakrishna Mission, one of the head of the Ramakrishna Mission. He said, "What is real spirituality? When I close my eyes, there is peace within. When I open my eyes, the thought is, what can I do for you? What can I give?" That is living a spiritual life. When I close my eyes, there is peace within. When I open my eyes, the thought is, what can I do for you? What can I give? And most of our lives, human beings, what is the experience? It's opposite. When I close my eyes, disturbance within. When I open my eyes, what can I get from you? That is how human beings generally, not everybody, I'm just saying, this is what human beings are like. So Bhagavan says, if you want your mind to be less scattered, then close your eyes, have peace within, open your eyes, think of what you can contribute to society rather than what you get from everything. What can you give? What can you give? So with that, I think we have come to the end of the questions. And I think, good timing, because we have 3 more minutes till the end. And I think all the questions should have got answered within these 3 things that I took topics. So, Sai Ram.